It was a clock counting down to a moment that could destroy the world. For over 75 years, the Doomsday Clock has ticked closer to nuclear midnight, a grim reminder of humanity's most dangerous inventions. Ironically, it was Americans who created it in 1947, just 2 years after dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and plotting another lightning war against the Soviet Union. But that war didn't unfold as they imagined. It became long, tense, and chillingly cold. Today, we're diving into some of the most explosive moments of the 20th century. We'll uncover how a single speech ignited the Cold War, the secret plans for nuclear strikes and proxy wars, the real story behind early color revolutions in Eastern Europe, why a wall came to symbolize a divided world. The Doomsday Clock wasn't just a symbol, it was a warning. September 3rd, 1945, marked the official end of World War II. Italy, Germany, and Japan had surrendered, but the tension between the United States and the Soviet Union was already rising. Just 10 days after victory celebrations in Moscow, the US Deputy Secretary of State declared that if anything was certain in the world, it was that a future war between the US and USSR was inevitable. On March 5, 1946, at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill gave a speech urging Western nations to unite in defense of democratic values. The threat was clear. He famously spoke of the Iron Curtain descending across Europe, marking the official start of the Cold War. Traveling to Fulton, Churchill was accompanied by President Harry Truman, and in the luxurious train car, they discussed secret military plans. One plan, called Unthinkable, involved using defeated German forces against the Soviet Union in a future conflict. Another, Totality, ordered by Truman, envisioned a nuclear strike on 20 Soviet cities, including Moscow and Leningrad. At the time, the United States was the only nuclear power, enjoying unmatched strategic dominance, but that would soon change. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan, ending America's nuclear monopoly and creating a fragile balance of power. Just 5 days earlier, in Brussels, delegations from 10 Western European countries, along with Canada and the US, ratified the NATO treaty. This military alliance, with bases around the globe, became America's tool for asserting global power under the guise of collective defense. The next year, the Korean War erupted. Korea, divided into North and South, officially didn't recognize each other. Over 3 years of combat claimed roughly 3 million lives, including civilians. US forces fought under the UN flag, while Soviet and Chinese support bolstered the North. President Truman summed up the stakes bluntly. The US was fighting in Korea, so it wouldn't have to fight in Chicago, New Orleans, or San Francisco. April 12, 1951, became known as Black Thursday. North Korean MiG-15 pilots, flown by Soviet crews, engaged 49 American B-29 bombers with 150 F-86 Sabres in the skies over Korea. In just 10 minutes, the US lost 12 planes, while the MiGs returned unscathed. Indirect clashes like these, fought on foreign soil between two superpowers, became the hallmark of Cold War proxy wars. One iconic image captures this era perfectly. 1972, Vietnam, a 9-year-old girl burned by napalm. Vietnam, like Korea, was split, the communist North and a US-backed South. When American troops entered Vietnam in 1965, the Soviet Union sent military advisors and air defense units to support the North, shooting down thousands of US aircraft over the course of the war. Early one morning, American tanks rolled up to the edge of East Germany and stopped just meters from the border. The Soviets responded within the hour, positioning T-54 tanks directly across from them. This tense standoff, known as the Berlin Crisis, brought the world to the brink of World War III. Both sides were armed and authorized to fire if attacked. For nearly a full day, US and Soviet tanks faced each other, engines roaring. Nikita Khrushchev ordered Marshal Konev in Moscow, "Position our tanks on the neighboring street, keep the engines running, let the sound echo through loudspeakers." By morning, no shots had been fired. Khrushchev then commanded the tanks to pull back, and the Americans followed suit. The world exhaled, but the danger wasn't over. Just a month later, the Cuban Missile Crisis erupted. President Kennedy had deployed 15 US medium-range missiles near Izmir, Turkey, capable of hitting Moscow in 20 minutes. The Soviets retaliated by placing their missiles in Cuba. When reconnaissance photos confirmed the launch sites, the US scrambled to respond. Kennedy's advisors offered three options: invade Cuba, strike the missiles directly, or impose a naval blockade. He wisely chose the blockade. Tensions peaked on October 27, 1962, Black Saturday, when a US spy plane was shot down over Cuba. Nuclear war seemed imminent. Through intense back-channel negotiations, catastrophe was averted. The USSR removed missiles from Cuba, and the US withdrew its missiles from Turkey. Afterward, a direct hotline between Washington and Moscow, the Red Phone, was established to prevent such crises. By the summer of 1973, détente was visible on the world stage. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev visited President Nixon at Camp David and declared, "The Cold War is over." Despite this apparent easing, espionage and counterintelligence remained active, shaping the delicate balance of power. Treaties followed: nuclear non-proliferation, missile defense limits, and arms reduction agreements. Cooperation even extended into space, culminating in the 1975 Apollo-Soyuz mission, where US and Soviet spacecraft docked and astronauts shook hands in orbit. By the late 1970s, détente began to fade. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December 1979 reignited tensions. The US and allies responded with protests and boycotts, including the 1980 Moscow Olympics. Soviet forces faced fierce resistance from well-armed insurgents supported by the US, leading to a 9-year quagmire. The last Soviet soldier left Afghanistan on February 15, 1989. Meanwhile, global politics shifted dramatically during the 1980s under Gorbachev's new thinking, aimed at ending Cold War confrontation and promoting cooperation. Landmark agreements followed, including the 1987 INF Treaty and informal meetings with US leaders that set the stage for reducing hostility. After nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall, the ultimate symbol of division, finally fell. On November 9, 1989, East Germans were allowed to travel freely to the West. The wall's demolition began in 1990, and Germany officially reunited. The Warsaw Pact dissolved in 1991, NATO expanded into former East Germany, and the US and Russia signed the Camp David Declaration in 1992, formally ending the Cold War. The declaration promised that both nations would no longer see each other as adversaries and would embrace friendship and partnership. Yet in reality, old rivalries persisted. Russia abandoned communism, but tensions with the West continued. Orange revolutions in former Soviet states, NATO's eastward expansion, and the lack of security guarantees from the West reignited global friction. Today, the Doomsday Clock ticks closer to midnight than ever. For Russia, the fight is no longer cold. It's a hybrid war, a new front in an increasingly unstable world. Live in the moment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.